Forget the movie version of Behind the Lines. Most nights weren't firefights. They were wet socks, cold ground, and the sound of your own teeth. Official kit lists promised one neat system for shelter and sleep. Reality was messier. Men cut, stitched, and borrowed materials because the issued answer was too loud, too heavy, or simply not there. This list isn't about legends. It's about rigs that worked until they didn't. These are the 7 hidden WW2 Allies sleeping rigs special forces used behind lines. Number 7. Parachute silk bivy bags. The soft cover they couldn't officially carry. A parachute was supposed to be turned in, inspected, and accounted for. Training notes and supply discipline treated silk and lines as recoverable equipment when circumstances allowed, not raw material for personal kit. A man on operations wasn't officially issued a custom bivy. He was issued standardized bedding in shelter stores if the mission profile could carry them. But parachute silk had 2 things raiders prized. It was quiet, and it packed small. In Northwest Europe in 1944-45, SAS patrols and small raiding parties sometimes repurposed chute fabric into improvised covers stitched or simply folded and tied because a flapping ground sheet or bulky blanket could betray you. Silk also shed wind-driven drizzle better than wool alone. Lines became tie cords. Panels became a body-length sack you could crawl into without dragging a tent footprint across a hedgerow. When it worked, it bought a few hours of sleep and kept a weapon drier. When it failed ugly. Wet silk clung to clothing, trapped condensation, and in cold snaps it could accelerate chilling. And if you needed to prove what happened to a parachute, "I made a sleeping bag," wasn't a great answer. Number 6. Rubberized ground sheets from assault boats. The waterproof lining they smuggled ashore. Assault boats and their fittings were stores, not a scrap pile. Royal Marine Commandos and Army Commandos were expected to land with specified loads, keep craft serviceable, and report losses through the chain. Cannibalizing boat material for comfort wasn't part of the pamphlets. The priority was the next crossing, not tonight's sleep. But rubberized fabric was gold on a shoreline. In Mediterranean raids and landings where wet rock, surf, and spray turned bedding into dead weight, men sometimes cut usable panels from damaged boats or worn spray covers. The point wasn't luxury. It was insulation by separation. One thin waterproof layer under a blanket stopped ground moisture from wicking heat away all night. It also kept equipment drier when you had to cache it and move. Used well, it reduced trench foot risk and made a short halt actually restorative. Used badly, it created a slick, noisy sheet that reflected light and shifted under you. There were also practical consequences. A repaired boat that was missing fabric might pass a quick glance, then fail under load on the next operation. Salvage could keep you alive and quietly steal capability from tomorrow. Number 5. Camouflaged lean-tos from camouflage netting. The secret canopy nobody talked about. Camouflage nets were issued to conceal positions and vehicles, not to build personal shelters. Doctrine cared about signature, shape, shine, and shadow from the air. Nets were supposed to be sighted, pegged, and controlled. Cutting them up, readying them, or dragging them along a route risked damaging unit camouflage stores and creating gaps that commanders noticed fast. Behind the lines, though, the problem wasn't comfort. It was being seen. So small teams sometimes turned netting into low lean-tos, net over a line, vegetation woven in, edges weighted with stones because it broke up the one thing that gets you killed from above: a clean human outline. In wooded Europe, that mattered during daylight hides between movements. A ground sheet might keep you dry. It didn't stop a pilot or an observer from spotting a straight-edged shape. When it worked, the net made a hide look like nothing at all, and it kept drizzle off enough to preserve body heat. When it failed at distance. Netting that wasn't dressed with local foliage could read as a pattern, not a bush. And if you moved with it, it snagged on everything and left a trail of pulled leaves like a breadcrumb line. Number 4. Collapsible jungle hammocks. The swinging sleep that wasn't on the list. Jungle doctrine talked about staying dry, preventing disease, and keeping moving. In British and Commonwealth practice, loads were specified tightly, especially for long-range penetration groups like Ord Wingate's Chindits in Burma, 1943-44 because every extra pound meant slower columns and more exhaustion. Hammocks weren't universally standard issue across units, and in some formations they were treated as optional, not a guaranteed line item. On the ground, the jungle punished anyone who slept down low. Leeches, damp, insects, and the constant rot of clothing that never fully dried. So some patrols and specialist troops favored collapsible hammocks or improvised versions with mosquito netting, using cord and a light spreader bar to get off the mud. It wasn't about comfort. It was about reducing bites, keeping a wound cleaner, and avoiding the heat loss that comes from saturated earth pulling warmth out of your back. In success cases, men reported better rest and fewer skin infections during extended stays. In failure cases, hammocks forced predictable tie points to trees, making your hide easier to read. And in monsoon winds, a poorly rigged hammock could dump you into the mud at 2 a.m. with everything soaked. If you had to sleep in one system out there, would you choose the ground or the swing? Before we move on, what would you prioritize if you had to bed down wet and exposed? Waterproofing under you, or concealment over you? Put your pick in the comments. And if you want WW2 history without the poster slogans, subscribe because the top 3 rigs get even more improvised and more risky. Number 3. Scavenged civilian blankets. Warmth that came with a paper trail. Officially, you didn't just pick up civilian bedding. Allied directives and unit orders stressed discipline around requisitioning. Take only through authorized channels when possible, record it, pay when policy required, and avoid anything that would compromise local support or blow your cover. On clandestine work, even the bulk mattered. A blanket is heavy. A blanket is obvious. Then the reality hits at night. A small team lying still loses heat fast, even in temperate Europe. So men scavenged what was available. Wool blankets from abandoned houses, horse rugs from barns, quilted eiderdowns that packed better than you'd expect when lashed tight with cord. Sometimes it was barter with sympathetic civilians. Sometimes it was pure necessity after a wet crossing or a forced march that left issued kit lost, soaked, or cached miles back. When it worked, a thick civilian wooler made the difference between real sleep and shivering until dawn, and it could be ditched without sacrificing official stores. When it failed, it left fingerprints, distinctive patterns, village-made stitching, even lice and bedbugs that tore through a patrol's health in days, and a missing blanket that started questions in exactly the wrong place. Number 2. Insulated boot sock sleeping systems. When your feet became the sleeping bag. Army manuals treated footwear like a system. Boots fitted, socks changed, feet dried, and circulation protected. For specialists, standard packing lists still assumed some form of blanket or bag, plus a ground sheet where possible. Sleeping in boots wasn't the ideal. Neither was stuffing your best insulation into the part of your body that sweats. But behind the lines, weight and speed argued with doctrine. If you couldn't carry a full sleep kit, you concentrated insulation where cold would disable you first. Men doubled socks, rotated pairs inside clothing to dry by body heat, and used spare socks as mitts at night. Some stuffed socks and rags inside the trouser legs and cinched cuffs to trap warm air around calves and feet. Others loosened laces and slept with boots on to keep them from freezing solid or being lost in a sudden move. When it worked, you stayed mobile. No numb feet at first light. No boots that turned into boards. When it failed slowly. Damp insulation collapsed. Blisters opened, and trench foot risk climbed, especially after days of wet ground and no chance to properly dry or change out. Mobility bought you time, and then demanded payment. Number 1. Covert heated, Tommy cooker, microstoves. A few minutes of heat, and a lifetime of consequences. Regulations were blunt about light and noise discipline. Heat meant flame, smoke, smell signals that carried. Standard doctrine pushed cold rations when you couldn't guarantee concealment. Fuel tabs and cookers existed, but their use was controlled, especially on reconnaissance and raiding where a single glow could undo hours of careful movement. So men miniaturized the problem. A Tommy cooker could be as simple as a tiny improvised stove, a mess tin shielded low to the ground, a pinched fuel tablet, a shortened wick, even a homemade burner from a small tin with punched air holes. The goal wasn't a hot meal. It was a few minutes of heat to dry socks, Warm hands enough to work a weapon, or get something down your throat that didn't feel like swallowing gravel. When it worked, it restored function quietly, quickly, with the flame hidden behind a bank or inside a ruin. When it failed catastrophically. A flare of light, a thread of smoke in still air, the unmistakable smell of heating ration fat. More than one hide was abandoned because someone insisted on warmth. You can follow every regulation and still freeze. You can break one rule and survive. The problem is you rarely get to choose the consequences you invite. All of these rigs live in the gap between what an institution can plan and what a human body can endure. Paper doctrine imagines clean categories: issued, authorized, forbidden. Night doesn't care. Sleep becomes a negotiation with weight, damp, visibility, and fear, paid in small compromises that stack up over days. If you want World War II history without simplification or mythology, subscribe. We'll keep following the overlooked details, choices, and trade-offs that decide what soldiers could actually do out there.